The day Wade Lancaster uncovered the hidden cameras in his own home, everything changed. What began as a quiet suspicion about his wife Odessa's late-night shifts unraveled into a chilling conspiracy of betrayal, lies, and manipulation. As Wade pieced together the truth, secret transactions, clandestine recordings, and a name that kept surfacing, Theo Carmona, one question haunted him. Was anything real in their marriage? When a DNA test revealed a shocking twist, Wade's entire world shattered, leaving him with a choice that would redefine his future. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching this from in the comments below. And if you enjoy gripping tales like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on the next story. The story begins with Wade Lancaster, a man whose life has been shaped by the Army. Enlisting right after college, Wade thrived in the structured environment of military service. For nearly 3 decades, his career brought him a profound sense of purpose, but at the cost of personal sacrifices. His deployments to Korea, Iraq, and Afghanistan left an indelible mark on his marriage and family life. When Wade retired, he and his wife Odessa settled into a modest suburban neighborhood in a quiet cul-de-sac lined with small but charming homes. It was the kind of place where neighbors hosted block parties, kids rode their bikes on the street, and everyone knew each other's business. Yet beneath the surface of this picturesque setting, Wade and Odessa struggled to adjust to civilian life. Their once dynamic relationship, already strained by years of separation, had grown distant. Wade's neighborhood reflected his new reality. On one side lived Vernon and Lana Darby, a younger couple with a penchant for hosting social gatherings. Vernon was outgoing, but his wide grins often carried an undertone that made Wade uneasy. Lana, confident and alluring, had a sharp wit and a habit of lingering glances. Across the street was Gina, a single mom whose athletic build and sharp mind caught Wade's attention more than he cared to admit. Odessa, meanwhile, found solace in her career. She worked as the lead nurse on a prestigious brain surgery team at a nearby hospital. Her professional accomplishments often left Wade feeling overshadowed, a sentiment that was exacerbated by her frequent mentions of Dr. Theo Carmona, the charismatic surgeon she worked with. While Odessa dismissed Theo's admiration as harmless workplace flirtation, Wade's instincts told him otherwise. The cracks in their marriage became more evident during neighborhood events. At a block party, Odessa's irritation with Curtis, the boisterous neighbor, led to her seeking Wade's rescue. Yet Wade was preoccupied talking with Gina, an interaction Odessa noted with a quiet but unmistakable look of disapproval. These subtle tensions added layers to their already complex relationship. Beyond their suburban life, the story extends to Venezuela, a stark contrast to the tranquility of their cul-de-sac. The bustling streets and looming political tension of Caracas serve as a backdrop to the pivotal moments in Wade and Odessa's unraveling marriage. It's here that Odessa's professional mission takes a darker turn, leading her into a web of deceit and danger. The quiet of retirement settled over Wade like a heavy, unfamiliar weight. For years, his identity had been tied to the uniform, the structure of daily orders, and the camaraderie of his fellow soldiers. Now, the days stretched before him with an unsettling emptiness. In their modest suburban home, Wade found himself at a loss, unsure of how to fill the void. Odessa, on the other hand, seemed busier than ever. As the lead nurse on a prestigious brain surgery team, her job demanded long hours, quick thinking, and unwavering focus. She thrived in her role, often coming home exhausted but glowing with the pride of another successful operation. However, her professional success only deepened the divide between them. "Long day?" Wade asked one evening as she walked through the door, dropping her bag onto the entryway table. "You have no idea," Odessa replied, slipping off her shoes. "Theo was a nightmare today, barking orders like we're in the army or something." Wade stiffened at the mention of Theo. His name had become a fixture in their conversations, always accompanied by Odessa's exasperation or reluctant admiration. "You talk about him a lot," Wade said, his voice carefully neutral. Odessa paused, glancing at him. "He's my boss, Wade. It's not like I have a choice." The two men looked from Wade to Dessa and back. The tension hung in the air, unspoken but palpable. It was the same tension that had been growing since Wade's retirement. He'd thought they would reconnect, rediscover the rhythm they'd had before his deployments. Instead, he felt more isolated than ever, watching Odessa immerse herself in a world he wasn't part of. On weekends, Wade tried to reestablish some semblance of connection. He suggested movie nights, walks in the park, even small getaways. But Odessa often declined, citing exhaustion or last-minute work obligations. "Can we do it next weekend?" she'd say, not meeting his eyes. "Sure," Wade would reply, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The weekends came and went, and the plans never materialized. The distance between them wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Wade could feel it growing with each passing day. Memories of their past fights bubbled to the surface, particularly the time he'd been deployed to Korea for a year. Back then, their relationship had teetered on the edge of collapse. Wade had suspected infidelity, though he'd never found concrete proof. Now the old doubts resurfaced. Odessa's behavior mirrored those turbulent days. Late nights at work, vague explanations, and a certain guardedness that set Wade's instincts on edge. It didn't help that Lana Darby seemed to enjoy fueling his insecurities. "You know, I ran into Odessa at the mall the other day," Lana said casually during one of their neighborhood block parties. "Oh yeah?" Wade replied, trying to sound indifferent. "She was with Theo." "They looked close," Lana added, her eyes flicking to him with a knowing look. Wade clenched his jaw. "They're colleagues. Of course they spend time together." "Sure," Lana said, her tone dripping with suggestion. "If you say so." The seed of doubt that had been planted in Korea now took root. Wade began noticing the small things. Odessa's frequent mentions of Theo, the way she guarded her phone, the lingering scent of cologne that wasn't his. One evening he decided to confront her, unable to keep his suspicions bottled up any longer. "Odessa," he began, as they sat across from each other at the dinner table. "Is there something going on with you and Theo?" she said. Her fork paused mid-air, and she looked at him with a mixture of surprise and irritation. "What are you talking about?" "You've been distant lately," Wade said, his voice measured but firm. "And I can't ignore the way you talk about him." Odessa sighed, setting her fork down. "Theo is my colleague, Wade. That's all. I don't know why you're making this into something it's not." "Because I know what distance feels like," Wade shot back. "We've been here before. Remember Korea?" Her expression hardened. "You think I don't remember? Do you know how lonely I was while you were off playing soldier? How many nights I spent wondering if you'd even come back?" The bitterness in her voice caught him off guard. He opened his mouth to respond but couldn't find the words. Wade's instincts told him there was more to the story, but Odessa's defenses were ironclad. Her late nights continued, and Wade's sense of isolation deepened. He found himself retreating into his own world, revisiting old Army contacts, and even considering freelance consulting work to occupy his time. During one such moment of solitude, Lana stopped by, carrying a plate of freshly baked cookies. "Thought you might need some company," she said with a smile. Wade hesitated but let her in. Over the next hour, their conversation drifted from casual to personal. "She's slipping away from you, Wade," Lana said softly, leaning forward. "You deserve better than that." Wade didn't respond, but her words lingered long after she left. The doubts that had taken root now bloomed into full-blown suspicion. Wade began noticing more signs. An unfamiliar hotel charge on their credit card statement. Odessa's overly defensive responses when he asked about her day, and a stray text from Theo that popped up on her phone when she left it unattended. As the days went by, Wade couldn't shake the feeling that he was being lied to, and for a man whose entire career had been built on uncovering the truth, the betrayal stung more deeply than he could have anticipated. The annual neighborhood block party was a tradition Wade had always appreciated in theory, but rarely enjoyed in practice. This year, It felt more like an obligation than a celebration. Wade and Odessa arrived together, carrying a casserole dish she'd prepared the night before. The suburban cul-de-sac buzzed with activity, kids running between yards, grills smoking with the scent of beer and wine. Wade scanned the crowd, noting familiar faces. Vernon Darby stood near the grill, beer in hand, laughing a little too loudly at something Curtis, the loudmouthed neighbor, had said. Lana lingered nearby, her sharp eyes surveying the gathering with a mix of amusement and calculation. "I'll go put this with the food," Odessa said, lifting the casserole. "I'll grab us some drinks," Wade replied, already heading toward the table lined with bottles and cans. As Wade poured himself a beer, he felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning, he found Gina, the athletic single mom who lived a few houses down. She was dressed casually in jeans and a tank top, her toned arms crossed as she gave him a wry smile. "Don't tell me you're actually drinking tonight, Wade," Gina teased. "Just one," he replied with a chuckle. "I think I've earned it." "You always say that," she said, stepping closer. "You don't strike me as the let-loose type." "Old habits," Wade admitted, taking a sip. "Hard to shake the Army mindset." Gina nodded knowingly. "Discipline's a good thing, but it's okay to relax once in a while." Their conversation meandered from fitness routines to neighborhood gossip. Wade found himself enjoying the ease of their interaction. Too much, perhaps. He glanced toward Odessa, who was talking to Curtis by the grill. She caught his eye and raised her brow, her expression a mixture of irritation and silent demand. Wade recognized the look. "Come, I've made it. Come help me." "I should," Wade began, gesturing vaguely toward Odessa. "Go be the hero?" Gina quipped. "Good luck." As Wade approached, he heard Curtis mid-story, his voice booming over the chatter. Odessa's polite smile was thin, and her body language screamed discomfort. "Curtis," Wade said, interrupting, "mind if I steal my wife for a second?" Curtis grinned. "Sure, but you owe me a drink for cutting me off." "Neil," Wade replied, steering Odessa away. Finally, she muttered under her breath, "I thought he'd never shut up." "Why didn't you just walk away?" Wade asked, half joking. "Because I'm trying to be polite," Odessa said, rolling her eyes. Then, with a pointed glance toward Gina, she added, "Something you could learn." Wade let the comment slide, though it pricked at him. He handed Odessa a drink and was about to suggest they find a quieter spot when a familiar voice interrupted. "Processo Wade?" Theo Carmona's smooth, confident tone cut through the crowd. Theo, impeccably dressed even for a casual event, strode toward them with an easy smile. Odessa's face lit up in a way that Wade couldn't ignore. "Theo," Odessa said warmly, "I didn't know you'd be here." "Lana insisted," Theo replied, gesturing toward the woman in question. Lana was leaning against the fence, her gaze flicking between Wade and Theo with a spark of mischief. "Nice to finally meet the legendary Wade," Theo said, extending a hand. "Odessa talks about you all the time." "I've experienced most of the symptoms," she answered. Wade shook his hand, his grip firm. "Good to meet you, Theo." The interaction was civil enough, but Wade couldn't shake the feeling that Theo's comment carried an undertone of challenge. Odessa, meanwhile, seemed completely at ease, her body language open and relaxed in Theo's presence. As the conversation drifted into small talk, Wade's focus shifted momentarily to Lana, who had sauntered over to join them. She stood closer to Wade than necessary, her shoulder brushing his. "Fun party, isn't it?" Lana said, her voice low and teasing. "I saw you talking to Gina earlier. She's cute." "Just being neighborly," Wade replied, keeping his tone neutral. "Sure," Lana said with a knowing smirk. Then, leaning closer, she added, "Don't let Odessa catch you staring. She might get jealous." Wade stiffened. "I wasn't staring." "Relax," Lana said, laughing softly. "I'm just messing with you." She shrugged. Before Wade could respond, Vernon called out from the grill. "Lana, grab me another beer, will you?" "Get it yourself," Lana shot back, but there was no heat in her words. She lingered for a moment longer before sauntering away. End quote. Odessa noticed the interaction, her eyes narrowing slightly. She's always like that? Like what? Wade asked, feigning ignorance. You know what? Odessa said sharply. Flirty. Maybe, but you're the one who invited Theo, Wade countered, his tone clipped. Odessa's expression hardened. He's a colleague, Wade. Stop making something out of nothing. The tension between them simmered, unspoken but palpable. As the evening wore on, Wade couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Vernon's laughter carried over from the grill, too loud and too frequent. Lana's glances grew bolder, and Theo's presence seemed to amplify Odessa's ease and Wade's unease. Later, as they walked home, Odessa broke the silence. Did you have fun? She asked, her tone neutral. Sure, Wade said, though the word came out hollow. She sighed. Like you pretend with Theo, Wade shot back. Odessa stopped walking, her eyes flashing with anger. This is ridiculous. He's my boss. That's it. Maybe, Wade said, his voice quieter but no less tense. But something feels off, Odessa, and you know it. They walked the rest of the way in silence, the space between them feeling wider than ever. He gripped the back of her chair and buried his face in her shoulder, and substituted for the tension. Wade sat in his office, the house unusually quiet. Odessa had left early for another long shift, her absence a common occurrence these days. He leaned back in his chair, staring at his laptop screen, a half-finished email to a former Army colleague sitting unsent. Something about the silence felt oppressive, like the walls were closing in. He couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. Had been off for months now. Deciding to clear his mind, Wade reached for the pile of mail on his desk. As he sifted through it, his eyes fell on a nondescript envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short, chilling message. Do you really know what's happening in your own house? Wade's stomach tightened. His instincts, honed by decades in Army intelligence, immediately went into overdrive. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on the smoke detector above his desk. Something about it seemed out of place. He climbed onto a chair for a closer look and noticed the faintest glint of metal, a tiny lens embedded within the device. His pulse quickened as he carefully removed the cover. Sure enough, a miniature camera was hidden inside. Wade's heart pounded. If there was one camera, there could be more. Over the next hour, Wade combed through the house methodically. He found 2 more cameras, one in the living room smoke detector and another in their bedroom vent. Each discovery felt like a betrayal, though the culprit wasn't yet clear. Who put these here? Wade muttered to himself, his voice low and tense. He inspected the devices, noting their make and model. They weren't amateur installations. These were professional-grade surveillance tools. Grabbing his phone, he called Carl Cross, a former Army tech specialist who now ran a private security business. Carl, it's Wade. I need your expertise. Can you come over today? What's going on? Carl asked, his tone immediately serious. I found cameras and mics in my house. I need them analyzed. Be there in an hour, Carl replied. While waiting, Wade continued his search. Hidden in a vent in the upstairs hallway, he found a small audio recorder. Plugging it into his laptop, he played back the most recent file. Voices crackled to life. Odessa and Theo. Did you transfer the money yet? Theo's voice asked, smooth and self-assured. Yes, Odessa replied, her tone tense. But if he finds out... I do not think so. He won't, Theo interrupted. Wade's too trusting. Besides, it's for the mission, right? There was a pause. Wade imagined Odessa's hesitation, her internal conflict. Then her voice came again, quieter this time. Not just the mission, Theo. You know that. I know, Theo said, his voice softening. And I'm here for you, Odessa. You deserve more than this. More than him. Part 2 of Pale Fire for the Dark Lord. The audio cut off, leaving Wade staring at his laptop screen in stunned silence. His breath came in shallow, angry bursts. The money, the secrecy, the way Theo spoke about him as if he were an obstacle. Disposable. Carl's knock at the door snapped Wade out of his thoughts. He quickly let him in, showing him the devices. "Professional work," Carl said, inspecting the cameras. "These aren't cheap. Someone's watching you, Wade." "Can you trace them?" Wade asked. Carl nodded. "If they're transmitting, I can follow the signal. Give me a couple of hours." While Carl worked, Wade sat in the living room, his mind racing. Memories of Odessa's guarded behavior played on a loop. He thought back to the block party, Theo's smirking face, and the text messages he'd seen on Odessa's phone. When Odessa came home that evening, she seemed surprised to find Wade waiting for her. "You're home early," she said, setting down her bag. "Yeah," Wade said, his voice deceptively calm. "We need to talk." Her eyes flickered with something, nervousness? Guilt? About what? Wade stood, holding up the camera he'd removed from their bedroom vent. "About this." Odessa froze. "What is that?" "Don't play dumb, Odessa," Wade said, his voice hard. "I found cameras in the house, and I've been listening to some very interesting conversations between you and Theo." Her face paled. "You're spying on me now?" "No," Wade shot back. "Someone else is. But you know more about this than you're letting on." Odessa's shoulders sagged as she sank into a chair. It's not what you think." "Then explain," Wade demanded. She hesitated, rubbing her temples. "Theo suggested the cameras. He said it was for security, with everything going on in the neighborhood." Wade laughed bitterly. Security or surveillance? Because these weren't set up to protect us. They were set up to monitor me." Odessa said nothing, her silence damning. "And the money, Odessa?" Wade pressed. "How much did you transfer to Theo? What's he using it for?" "It's for the mission," she said weakly. He's organizing a humanitarian effort in South America." I repeated. "Don't lie to me," Wade barked, slamming his hand on the table. "You're funneling money to him behind my back, and you're letting him use you." Tears filled Odessa's eyes. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "But it did," Wade said coldly, "and now you're caught." Carl returned later that night with his findings. The surveillance equipment had been installed by a private investigation firm hired by none other than Odessa herself. "Why?" Wade asked, showing her the report Carl had compiled. "What were you trying to prove?" Odessa stared at the floor, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you were cheating." Wade laughed bitterly. "Cheating? With who? Gina? Lana? I've been faithful, Odessa. But you've been hiding cameras in our home while having private conversations with Theo about replacing me." "I didn't want it to get this bad," Odessa said, tears streaming down her face. "Well, it has," Wade said, his voice cold and final. "And I'm done pretending we can fix this." As Odessa sobbed quietly, Wade turned and walked out of the room, his mind already planning the next steps. The betrayal was complete, and there was no going back. The morning Odessa left was unusually quiet, as if the house itself held its breath. Wade stood at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching her load her suitcase into Theo's car. She hadn't asked him to help, and he hadn't offered. Their usual farewell routine, a kiss, a lingering hug, a promise to stay in touch, was conspicuously absent. Instead, Odessa had given him a perfunctory nod, muttered something about her flight schedule, and walked out the door. Now, as he watched Theo hold the passenger door open for her, Wade's chest tightened with a mix of anger and resignation. She didn't even look back before sliding into the car, her silhouette stiff and unyielding. The car pulled away, its taillights fading down the street, and with it went the last shred of Wade's hope that their marriage could be saved. For the rest of the day, Wade drifted through the house, the silence now oppressive. Everywhere he turned, reminders of Odessa stared back at him. The neatly folded throw blanket on the couch, the framed photo of their wedding day on the mantel, her half-empty coffee mug in the sink. Yet, none of it felt like hers anymore. It all felt like remnants of a life that had already ended. By the afternoon, the anger set in. The quiet acceptance of the morning gave way to a simmering rage. Wade replayed their recent fights, the coldness in her voice, and the way she had lit up when Theo was around. Each memory fanned the flames of his suspicion. He couldn't ignore the audio recordings he'd heard, or the money she'd funneled to Theo. Something much bigger was happening, and Wade was determined to uncover the truth. After dinner, a solitary meal he barely touched, Wade pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. His finger hovered over a name he hadn't called in years, Armando Salazar. The man was a former comrade, stationed in Venezuela, now working as a private contractor. Wade trusted him implicitly, and if anyone could help him figure out what Odessa was really doing in South America, it was Armando. "Armando," Wade said when the call connected. "It's Wade Lancaster." "Why, well," Armando replied, his voice warm with surprise. "Been a long time, hermano. What's going on?" Wade didn't waste time on pleasantries. He explained the situation in quick, clipped sentences. Odessa's departure with Theo, the hidden cameras, the suspicious financial transactions, and his growing belief that her so-called humanitarian mission was a cover for something far more sinister. Armando listened without interruption, his tone serious when he finally spoke. "Sounds messy, Wade. You're saying she's in Venezuela?" Emma gave out a nod. "She's been there. I was also afraid she might commit suicide." "Yeah," Wade replied. "She's supposed to be working in Caracas, but I need someone on the ground to verify that, and to find out what she's really up to." The Phantom was playing the video game, and Wade watched as her body relaxed into relaxation. "Consider it done," Armando said confidently. "I'll start digging tonight. You want daily updates?" "Absolutely," Wade said, relief mingling with determination. "And keep it discreet. If she or Theo catch wind of this, it's over." With Armando handling things in Venezuela, Wade knew he needed someone local to help tie up loose ends at home. That's when he called Lisa Moore, a private investigator he'd worked with during his Army days. Lisa was sharp, resourceful, and, most importantly, owed him a favor. "Wade," Lisa said when she picked up, "haven't heard from you in ages. What's the catch?" "Odessa's left for South America," Wade explained. "She's traveling with another man. I need you to look into her financials, check her communications, and see if there's anything I've missed." "Sounds juicy," Lisa replied, her tone laced with curiosity. "I'll start tonight. Send me everything you've got." Wade exhaled, his mind racing with the possibilities. "Thanks, Lisa. I'll make it worth your while." By nightfall, Wade sat on the porch with a cigar and a glass of bourbon, staring into the darkness. He didn't know what Armando or Lisa would uncover, but he was certain of one thing. Odessa's departure was more than just a humanitarian mission. It was the beginning of the end, and Wade was ready to face whatever truths came next. As the smoke curled into the night sky, Wade felt a small flicker of clarity. For the first time in months, he wasn't just reacting to Odessa's choices. He was taking control. It started with a phone call. Wade had been waiting impatiently for days when Armando's name finally flashed on his phone screen. He stepped onto the back porch, his heart pounding, and answered. "Tell me you've got something," Wade said, his voice taut. "More than something," Armando replied, his tone grim. "You'd better sit down, hermano." Wade leaned against the porch railing, bracing himself. "Go ahead." "She's involved, Wade," Armando said without preamble. "Odessa and Theo aren't just on a humanitarian mission. They're running product. Pills and powder, hidden in medical supply shipments. The words hit Wade like a physical blow. He swallowed hard, struggling to process what he'd just heard. How do you know? My team intercepted a shipment, Armando continued. We've been monitoring their movements. Theo's connected to a cartel, and Odessa's been helping him move their product under the guise of charity work. We've got footage, documents, and witnesses. It's airtight. Wade gripped the railing, his knuckles white. Are you sure she knows what she's involved in? She's not just a bystander, Armando said firmly. I've got recordings of her and Theo discussing the operation. She's all in. Wade's chest tightened, a mix of anger and heartbreak surging through him. Send me everything. Already on its way, Armando said. There's more. Theo's been bragging to his contacts that Odessa's funding their trips. Looks like she's been using your money. Wade clenched his jaw, the betrayal cutting deeper. Thanks, Armando. Keep me updated. You got it, Armando replied. And Wade, I'm sorry, man. When the files arrived, Wade sat alone in his office, staring at the laptop screen. The evidence was damning. Photos of Odessa and Theo unloading crates, recorded conversations discussing their routes and drop-off points, and even emails where Odessa coordinated with Theo's contacts. One email stood out. Theo, I transferred the funds this morning. Make sure the supplies are packed discreetly. We can't afford any mistakes. Wade scrawled through the photos, each one driving the knife deeper. There she was, smiling as she stood beside Theo, both of them looking far too comfortable for coworkers. The recordings were even worse. In one, Odessa's voice was unmistakable. This has to go smoothly, Theo, she said. I can't risk Wade finding out. He'd never forgive me. He doesn't need to know, Theo replied. By the time he figures it out, we'll be set. Wade slammed his laptop shut, his pulse pounding in his ears. The betrayal was absolute. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about lies, stolen trust, and her complicity in something illegal and dangerous. She hadn't just betrayed their marriage. She'd betrayed everything he stood for. Wade called Lisa Moore, the private investigator, and forwarded her the files. She agreed to analyze them and help coordinate with legal authorities if necessary. After the call, Wade paced the house, his mind racing. He needed answers, but more than that, he needed closure. When Armando called later that evening, he had more updates. Odessa and Theo are planning another shipment, Armando said. They're using a remote road outside Caracas to avoid checkpoints. Are you intervening? Wade asked. We are, Armando confirmed. But I thought you'd want to know first. Keep me in the loop, Wade said. I need to see this through. He paused. 2 days later, Armando sent Wade a video. The footage was grainy but clear. A convoy of SUVs stopped at a makeshift checkpoint manned by Venezuelan authorities. Soldiers surrounded the vehicles, pulling crates from the back. The camera zoomed in on Theo, visibly arguing with one of the officers. Moments later, Odessa appeared, her hands raised in surrender as the soldiers cuffed her. Wade replayed the video twice, his emotions warring between vindication and sorrow. He'd wanted the truth, and now he had it, but it came with a weight he wasn't sure he could carry. That evening, Wade received an unexpected call from Odessa. Her voice was shaky, laced with panic. Wade, she said, I need your help. Wade gripped the phone tightly. Help? After everything you've done? I know I messed up, she pleaded. But Theo dragged me into this. I didn't know how to get out. You didn't know how to get out? Wade snapped. You knew exactly what you were doing, Odessa. I have the emails, the recordings. Don't insult me by pretending you're a victim. There was a long pause before she spoke again, her tone quieter. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me, Wade repeated, his voice rising. You lied to me. You used my money. You betrayed everything we built together. For what? For him? It wasn't just about Theo, she said weakly. It was about feeling alive, about being more than just your wife. Wade closed his eyes, her words cutting deeper than he expected. Well, congratulations, Odessa. You're more than my wife now. You're a criminal." Her sobs echoed through the phone, but Wade didn't falter. "I'll do one thing for you," he said finally. "I'll make sure the authorities know the full story. If there's a way to reduce your sentence, I'll find it. But after that, we're done." Wade worked with Lisa and Armando to hand over the evidence to Venezuelan prosecutors. The case against Theo and Odessa was airtight, and both faced years in prison. Though Wade had the option to press further charges in the U.S., he chose not to, letting the weight of her betrayal rest where it belonged. On the day he received confirmation of her sentencing, Wade packed the last of her belongings into a box and left them on the curb. He slid his wedding ring off, placing it in the box alongside hers, and closed the lid. As he stood on the porch, watching the sun set over the quiet cul-de-sac, Wade felt a strange sense of calm. The truth had come to light, and while it had cost him his marriage, it had also freed him from the web of lies he'd been caught in for far too long. The future stretched out before him, uncertain but full of possibility, and for the first time in months, Wade allowed himself to hope. The prison was stark and oppressive, its gray walls a far cry from the pristine hospital corridors Odessa used to walk. Wade entered the visitors area, escorted by a guard who gestured toward a metal table bolted to the floor. Sitting there, wrists shackled to the table, was Odessa. She looked thinner, her face pale and drawn, but her eyes still carried the familiar sharpness he once admired, and now distrusted. Wade took a seat across from her, setting a folder of papers on the table. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of unspoken words filling the silence. Finally, Odessa broke it. "You came," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I wasn't sure if you would." Wade's gaze was cold and unwavering. "Not for the reasons you think." Odessa's hands fidgeted against the restraints. "I've made mistakes, Wade, but—" "Stop," Wade cut her off, his voice low but firm. "No excuses. No justifications. I know everything, Odessa. The trafficking, the money, Theo. All of it." Her face fell, a flicker of panic crossing her features. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Theo, he convinced me." Wade slammed his hand on the table, silencing her. "Don't put this on Theo. You made choices, Odessa. You lied to me, you stole from me, and you betrayed me." "I didn't want to hurt you," she said weakly, tears pooling in her eyes. "You have to believe that." "Believe you?" Wade's voice was sharp with incredulity. "You were planning to ruin me. I saw the emails, the conversations with your lawyer. You weren't just betraying me, you were plotting to manipulate me, to use me until there was nothing left." Odessa's tears spilled over, but there was a hard edge in her voice as she replied. "What was I supposed to do, Wade? You were always in control, always the one making the sacrifices, the decisions. I spent years being the supportive wife while you were off saving the world. I needed something for me. This was the best way to get rid of oppressive controls over one's mind," the conductor said, gesturing to the prison walls around them. "And you chose this," Wade said, gesturing to the prison walls around them. "Drug trafficking, an affair, that's how you decided to find yourself?" "I didn't plan for it to go this far," she snapped, her voice rising. "I thought it would be a way out, a chance to start fresh. But Theo, he promised me things, and I believed him." "Because you wanted to," Wade said coldly. "You wanted to believe that you could have it all without consequences." Meredith leaned in to pet his hair. Odessa's hands clenched into fists. "And what about you, Wade? Do you think I didn't know about Denna? About those long deployments and the way she looked at you? Don't act like you're some saint." "Dana and I never crossed the line," Wade said evenly. "And even if we had, it wouldn't justify what you've done." Wade opened the folder and pulled out a stack of documents, sliding them across the table. "Recognize these?" he asked. Odessa's eyes flicked to the papers, her face paling further as she scanned them. "Where did you get these?" "Emails, financial records, recordings," Wade said. "Your entire operation laid out in black and white. You weren't just working with Theo. You were planning to use me as your safety net." You wanted me to sign a post-nuptial agreement so you could leave with everything." Odessa's jaw tightened, and for a moment, she said nothing. Finally, she let out a bitter laugh. "You always were too smart for your own good. And you underestimated me," Wade shot back. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I'd just roll over and let you destroy me? I thought you loved me," she said, her voice breaking. "Enough to forgive me." That's when it struck me that she wasn't suicidal. Wade's eyes narrowed. "I did love you, enough to overlook the distance, the lies, the way you shut me out. But forgiveness? That's off the table." Odessa leaned forward, desperation creeping into her tone. "We can fix this, Wade. I can make things right." "You're not listening," Wade said, his tone cutting. He pulled another set of papers from the folder and set them in front of her. "These are divorce papers. Sign them, and we're done." Her eyes widened as she stared at the documents. "Divorce? Wade, no. Please, we can still—" She drew a deep— "No, we can't," Wade interrupted. "You made your choice, Odessa. Now, I'm making mine." Odessa's hands trembled as she picked up the pen, but she didn't sign. Instead, she looked up at Wade, her expression a mixture of defiance and sorrow. "Do you really want to throw away everything we've built?" "What we built?" Wade repeated, leaning forward. "You tore it down the moment you chose Theo, the moment you chose money and lies over our marriage." Her voice grew softer, almost pleading. "You don't know what it was like for me, Wade. Watching you leave again and again, wondering if you'd come back, feeling like I was invisible in your life. I needed more. And instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix what was broken, you went behind my back," Wade said, his voice hard. "You didn't just betray me, Odessa, you destroyed us." Tears streamed down her face as she finally signed the papers, each stroke of the pen heavy with finality. When she was done, she pushed them back across the table, her hands shaking. "Is this what you wanted?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's what I needed," Wade replied, standing. "Goodbye, Odessa." He turned away. As Wade turned to leave, Odessa called after him, her voice breaking. "Wade, wait. Please, don't go like this." He paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "You made your bed, Odessa. Now you have to lie in it." Without another word, he walked out of the prison, the weight of their broken marriage settling heavily on his shoulders. But for the first time in months, he felt a sense of clarity. The woman he had once loved was gone, replaced by someone he could no longer trust. And while the betrayal still stung, he knew he was walking away stronger. As the prison gates closed behind him, Wade exhaled deeply. It was over. Finally. Over. The morning after his confrontation with Odessa, Wade met with Lisandro Lopez, the Venezuelan prosecutor overseeing the case. The government building was bustling with activity, a stark contrast to the stillness Wade carried inside. As he entered Lopez's office, the prosecutor stood and extended a firm hand. "Senor Lancaster, I've reviewed your materials. They're thorough," Lopez began, gesturing for Wade to sit. "This evidence strengthens our case significantly. I appreciate your cooperation." Wade placed a neatly organized folder on Lopez's desk. "It's all there. Emails, financial transactions, recorded conversations, even their plans for future shipments." Lopez leafed through the folder, his sharp eyes scanning the pages. "This will help ensure justice is served," he said. "Your wife and Dr. Carmona face serious charges. If convicted, they could spend decades in prison." Wade nodded, his expression grim but resolute. They made their choices. After finalizing the paperwork, Wade lingered for a moment. "What happens now?" Lopez leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "The case proceeds to trial. With the evidence you've provided, we can also pursue financial restitution. Any assets linked to the smuggling operation will be seized." "Good," Wade said, standing. "I'm not looking for vengeance, but I won't let her actions ruin the lives of others. As Wade left the building, a sense of finality settled over him. He had done what was necessary to protect himself and ensure Odessa was held accountable. Still, the emotional toll weighed heavily on his shoulders. Back at his hotel room, Wade poured himself a glass of whiskey and sank into the armchair by the window. The view of Caracas stretched out before him, vibrant yet chaotic, mirroring the turmoil inside him. He stared at his phone, scrolling through old photos of happier times with Odessa, their wedding day, family vacations, the moments they had fought so hard to build. But those memories felt like fragments of another life, one that no longer belonged to him. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts, a message from Dina. Her timing, as always, was impeccable. "How's everything going? Need to talk?" Wade hesitated for a moment before replying. "Could use a friendly voice. Can I call?" Her response came almost immediately, always. When Wade called, Dina's warm, steady voice greeted him. "Hey, soldier. How are you holding up?" He exhaled deeply, the tension in his chest easing just slightly. "It's a lot, Dina." She signed the divorce papers, but seeing her in that prison, hearing her excuses, it was like watching a stranger. "I'm sorry, Wade," Dina said softly. "I can't imagine how that must feel." "It's not just about her betrayal," Wade admitted. "It's what it represents. I built my life around honor, loyalty, trust, and she dismantled all of it." Dina was quiet for a moment, then said, "You didn't fail, Wade. She did. You held up your end of the marriage, even when it wasn't easy. That says more about you than her actions ever could." Her words struck a chord, and for the first time in days, Wade felt a glimmer of reassurance. "Thanks, Dina. I needed to hear that." "You're stronger than you think," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "And you don't have to face this alone." A week later, Wade returned to the United States, his mind still processing the whirlwind of events in Venezuela. He wasn't sure what to expect when he landed, but seeing Dina waiting for him at the airport brought a sense of comfort he hadn't felt in months. "Long flight?" she asked with a smile, her arms folded as she leaned against a column. "Long everything?" Wade replied, managing a faint grin. They embraced, the gesture natural and unspoken, as though no time had passed since their last meeting. As they walked to the parking lot, Dina glanced at him sideways. "So, what's next?" Wade sighed, running a hand through his hair. "First, I need to rebuild my life, my routine, myself." "And where do I fit into that plan?" Dina asked, her tone light but her gaze searching. Wade stopped walking, turning to face her. "Wherever you want to, Dina. You've been there for me when I didn't even know I needed it. I don't have all the answers, but I know I don't want to figure this out without you." And so they stayed figuring, exercising together, and taking turns in their bathrooms and comparing Facebook pictures. Her expression softened, and she reached for his hand. "Then we figure it out together." Over the next few weeks, Wade focused on putting his life back in order. He met with a lawyer to finalize the divorce and ensured all the evidence he had provided remained secure with the authorities. The legal battle over Odessa's finances began to take shape, with Wade determined to ensure she couldn't exploit any loopholes. Simultaneously, he began spending more time with Dina. Their connection, once forged in the crucible of war, now grew stronger in the quiet moments of shared meals, long walks, and late-night conversations. She was a steady presence, someone who understood the complexities of his past without judgment. One evening, as they sat on his porch, Dina leaned back in her chair, gazing at the stars. "Do you ever think about what's next, Wade, beyond all of this?" "All the time," Wade admitted. "I used to think I had it all figured out, career, family, purpose. But now, I think it's about finding balance, living for the moments that matter." "Huh? And what matters to you now?" she asked, her voice gentle. Wade looked at her, his expression serious yet hopeful. "You. Us. building something real. A smile spread across Dena's face and she reached for his hand. I can get on board with that. As the dust of his past began to settle, Wade found himself embracing the future with a cautious but open heart. The scars left by Odessa's betrayal would take time to heal, but with Dena by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Together, they began planning a quiet trip to the mountains, a chance to reconnect, to find peace, and to start anew. Though the road ahead was uncertain, Wade knew one thing for sure. He was finally free to rebuild his life on his own terms. And this time, he wouldn't be walking the path alone. Right. The day the divorce was finalized, Wade sat in his lawyer Elizabeth's office, watching her stamp the final documents. The sound of the stamp hitting the paper felt like a closing door, and yet a window to something new. Elizabeth looked up, offering a professional smile. It's done, she said. You're officially free. Wade nodded, a mixture of relief and exhaustion washing over him. Thanks, Elizabeth. I couldn't have done this without you. You made it easy by being prepared, she replied, and by staying calm under pressure. Not everyone does that in these situations. Years of practice, Wade said, his lips curling into a faint smile. But beneath the surface, he knew the hardest part wasn't the legal battle. It was repairing the relationships that had been collateral damage. Later that evening, Wade called his son Trent and daughter AA for a family video call. It wasn't the first time they'd spoken since the divorce process began, but this call felt different. It was time to address the lingering tension head-on. As their faces appeared on the screen, Wade noted the subtle signs of unease in both of them. Trent, now in college, looked tired but curious. AA, stationed with the Coast Guard, had a steely resolve in her expression that reminded him of Odessa. Thanks for making time to talk, Wade began, his tone measured. I know the past few months haven't been easy for any of us. Trent nodded. Yeah, no kidding. Dad, AA interjected, her voice direct. Is it really over with Mom? It is, Wade said, his voice steady but gentle. I didn't make this decision lightly. You both deserve to know the truth. Your mother, she made choices that I couldn't overlook. Choices that hurt this family. Trent frowned, leaning closer to the screen. You mean Theo? Wade exhaled, nodding. Theo. And more. It's complicated, but what matters is that I did everything I could to make things right. For her, for us, but at some point, I had to protect myself too. AA's eyes softened. Are you okay, Dad? I'm getting there, Wade admitted. It's been a tough road, but I'm not doing this alone. I've had support. Trent raised a brow. Support? From an old friend, Wade said carefully. Her name's Dena. She's been helping me through all of this. AA tilted her head, a small smile forming. Dena? From your army days? The same, Wade said. She's been a good friend, and we're seeing where things go. Trent exchanged a glance with AA, then looked back at Wade. You're happy with her? I am, Wade said, his voice firm but warm. And I hope you'll give her a chance when you're ready. AA nodded. If she's there for you, Dad, that's what matters. Trent shrugged, a faint grin appearing. I mean, as long as she's not trying to replace Mom or anything. She's not, Wade assured them. She respects what we've been through as a family. The conversation turned lighter after that, filled with updates about school, work, and shared memories. By the end of the call, Wade felt a renewed sense of connection with his children, a reminder that some bonds could withstand even the toughest storms. A week later, Wade invited Dena over for dinner. It wasn't just about spending time together. It was about introducing her to his kids in a way that felt organic and unpressured. AA was in town on leave, and Trent had driven home for the weekend. The timing felt right. When Dena arrived, she carried a bottle of wine in one hand and a warm smile on her face. "Hi, Wade," she said, leaning in for a quick hug. "You didn't say there'd be a welcoming committee." "I didn't want to scare you off," Wade joked, stepping aside to let her in. AA and Trent were waiting in the living room, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. Denna greeted them with a friendly, unassuming demeanor, shaking hands with Trent and giving AA a slight nod of respect. And then something confused AA. "Your dad's told me so much about you both," Denna said, her tone warm but not overbearing. "It's nice to finally meet you." "Likewise," AA replied, her voice neutral but polite. Trent just nodded, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Over dinner, the atmosphere gradually softened. Dina shared stories from her army days, carefully balancing humor with sincerity, and listened attentively as Trent and AA talked about their own experiences. She never tried to dominate the conversation, letting the focus remain on them. By the time dessert was served, AA was asking Dina about her time overseas, while Trent cracked a joke about Wade's grilling skills. Wade sat back, watching the dynamic unfold with quiet gratitude. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of normalcy returning. After the kids had gone to bed, Wade and Dina sat on the porch, the night air cool and crisp. Wade leaned back in his chair, a contented smile playing on his lips. After a bit, Wade started to tell his story again, but Dina put a hand on his shoulder. "They seem to like you," he said. Dana chuckled. "They tolerated me, which is a good start." "I'll take it," Wade replied, reaching for her hand. "Thank you for being here. For everything." She turned to him, her expression serious but tender. "Wade, you've been through hell and back. You don't have to thank me for caring about you." He squeezed her hand, the words he wanted to say caught somewhere between his heart and his throat. For now, it was enough to sit in silence. The stars above, a quiet witness to their new beginning. As the days turned into weeks, Wade continued rebuilding his life, step by step, conversation by conversation. With his children by his side and Dina offering steady support, he finally began to see a future that wasn't defined by betrayal, but by the resilience to move forward. Wade stood in his backyard, the soft hum of the evening settling around him. Dina was just inside, organizing the boxes she'd brought over after officially moving in the day before. He'd suggested she take her time, but true to her nature, she tackled the task head on. "Do you ever sit still?" he teased as she stepped out onto the porch with 2 glasses of iced tea. "Not when there's work to be done," she replied, handing him a glass and sitting next to him. "Besides, this house could use a woman's touch." Wade smirked, raising his glass. "To new beginnings?" "To new beginnings," Dina echoed, clinking her glass against his. The last few months had been a whirlwind of adjustments. Dina's transition to civilian life wasn't without its challenges, but she approached it with the same tenacity that had made her an exceptional soldier. She'd taken a consulting role with a private security firm, a position that allowed her the freedom to align her schedule with Wade's and to finally put roots down. "Have you thought more about that cabin in the mountains?" she asked, her tone light but hopeful. "Every day," Wade admitted. "It's the perfect place to unplug, just us, and the quiet." "And maybe a dog," Dina added with a grin. Wade laughed, the sound easy and genuine. "You're really pushing for that dog. You'll thank me when he scares off the squirrels," she said, leaning against his shoulder. Moments like these, Wade realized, were what he had been missing. It wasn't just about rebuilding his life. It was about creating something better, something grounded in mutual respect and trust. With Dana, there were no pretenses, no hidden agendas. She understood him in a way that felt effortless, and for the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe. As they settled into their new routine, Wade and Dana worked to blend their lives seamlessly. They planned weekend hikes, experimented with cooking meals that rarely turned out perfect, and spent quiet nights talking about their dreams for the future. Their bond, forged in the intensity of their military pasts, had transformed into something deeper, more intimate. One evening, as they sat on the couch reviewing old photo albums, Wade paused on a picture of himself in uniform, standing next to Dina during a deployment. "I look like a kid?" Wade remarked, shaking his head. "You were," Dana said with a soft smile. "But you were always the calm one, even back then. Everyone else panicked, but you kept us steady." Wade looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I never thanked you for what you did for me back then." "You don't have to," she replied. "We were a team." "We still are." Their shared history gave them a foundation, but it was their shared vision for the future that solidified their connection. Together, they weren't just rebuilding their lives. They were building a partnership defined by resilience and hope. One crisp autumn morning, Wade found himself standing outside the Dominion Hotel. The building loomed tall against the sky, its glass facade reflecting the sunlight. This was the place where his marriage had officially ended, where Odessa had once asked him to meet her as part of her manipulative scheme. But today it represented something entirely different, a fresh start. Dana stepped out of the car, adjusting the strap of her bag as she joined him. "You okay?" she asked, her voice full of quiet concern. Dana stared at her. "I'm more than okay," Wade replied, taking her hand. "This feels right." They checked into a suite on the top floor, the view offering a sweeping panorama of the city. As they stood by the window, Wade felt a surge of gratitude, not just for Dana, but for the journey that had brought him here. "I used to think this place would always remind me of what I lost," he said, his voice steady. "But now, it reminds me of what I've gained." Dana leaned against him, her hand resting on his chest. "You've been through hell, Wade, but you came out stronger." He nodded, his gaze distant but reflective. "It wasn't easy, though. There were times I felt like I was drowning. Losing Odessa, realizing who she really was, it broke something in me. But it also made me see what really matters. Honesty, trust, the people who stand by you when things get hard. And you've got those people now," Dina said. "You've got me." As the evening wore on, Wade and Dina shared a quiet dinner in the hotel's rooftop restaurant. The soft hum of conversation around them blended with the clinking of glasses and the faint strains of piano music. Wade found himself thinking about the road ahead. "Do you ever wonder what the future looks like?" he asked, his tone introspective. "All the time," Dina replied, "but I've learned not to plan too far ahead. Life has a way of surprising you." "Good surprises, I hope," Wade said with a smile. "With you, I think they will be," she said, reaching across the table to take his hand. As they finished their meal and returned to their suite, Wade felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The chaos of the past no longer defined him. He had faced betrayal, endured heartbreak, and emerged with a clearer understanding of who he was and what he wanted. Standing on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below, Wade turned to Dina. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" she asked, tilting her head. "For believing in me," Wade replied. "For helping me believe in myself again." Dina smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "That's what partners do." And as the night deepened, Wade knew that his journey was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, he was ready to embrace whatever came next. With Dana by his side, and a future built on trust, resilience, and love.